I'm Jefferson Smith, sitting in for Thom Hartmann. Honored to do so. Is every billionaire a policy failure? What should marginal tax rates be on your 10 millionth and first dollar? Or maybe your 100 millionth and first dollar? Should there be a wealth tax, as Elizabeth Warren has boldly suggested? Should antitrust enforcement and the estate tax again become mainline political issues? Economic policy by Twitter handle or even 240-character tweet can make us nervous. 240 characters seems dicey. Heck, doing it in 8 minutes in between commercial breaks seems tough enough. But the question has been raised. Should there be aggressive action to address wealth inequality? And to be clear, yes, I said wealth inequality, not only income inequality. Most of the inequality is not because somebody earns a high salary. It's because of entrenched, including inherited wealth. This is a question of many dimensions. The call-in number here is 202-808-9925, 202-808-9925. The big question is, should we treat wealth inequality as the big question? Should that be something that every candidate for president, at least every candidate in the Democratic primary, is taking on squarely? And if so, how should they be taking it on? Or should they hide from it a little bit because it is uncomfortable? It is particularly uncomfortable when you have to raise the federal maximum from donors around the country. It isn't fun to go to your local university club, your local art club, your local Mac club, your local country club. It's not fun to go to your local boardroom for the corporation, the Fortune 500 company that happens to be based in your big city in your state, and say, you know what, we're going to go squarely after wealth inequality, and to do that, we are going to do something about antitrust enforcement. We're going to do something about the estate tax. We're going to do something about marginal tax rates. We're going to do something about corporate regulation. It's not fun to do that, and then afterwards, and by the way, $2,500 a piece from you and your spouse for the primary and the general, and from your friends, because I'm running for president. The question, though, has been raised. Should it be a central question? And there's lots of dimensions. The moral question of haves versus the have way too littles. The economic volatility question. Greater inequality indicates a lack of resiliency and has historically preceded crashes. And also the stress question, per Richard Wilkinson. The impact on crime, the impact on life expectancy. As we know from Wilkinson's research, you can read his book or you can see his TED Talk. A country, once it already is wealthy to some degree, doesn't get healthier, doesn't get happier when it gets a little wealthier. But it gets a lot unhealthier, it gets a lot unhappier as wealth disparities grow, as income disparities in his research, as those grow. Lots of dimensions, but I just want to talk about democracy, and I want to respond to a guy named Tom Nichols. I'd also like to respond to you. The call-in number here is 202-808-9925. My name is Jefferson Smith. You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Going to be sitting in this week, and this is a big thing I want to tackle with. It is an honor to be here and to guide our conversation during these days while Tom is away. And it's been a little bit since I've sat in. Thankfully, Tom has been healthy and present. And this topic has been building up. Presidential candidate after presidential candidate has announced, and a number of them have made pretty bold pronouncements. I would say the boldest I have seen, even bolder than trying to go back to post-Eisenhower, even during Eisenhower, even pre-Eisenhower marginal tax rates, was in fact a wealth tax, and not just at the time of death, which is what an inheritance tax or an estate tax is. It is putting the question on the table. A lot of dimensions, but I, for a moment, want to open this up just by talking about democracy. The idea that we decide together how things should go, rather than having power controlled merely by inherited power, or merely property ownership, or merely control of the strongest and most numerous weaponry. The idea that human beings should get together and figure stuff out. The idea that I think is the most virtuous idea that gives us any excuse to be proud and the strongest excuse to be proud of our nation. So not just the Wilkinson, Robert Reich, Joseph Stiglitz, Naomi Klein, Thomas Piketty space, not just sort of the variety of economic questions relative to wealth inequality, but just the decision-making question, just the democracy question, just the Larry Lessig, Nancy McLean, Ari Berman space, democracy. Got him Tom Nichols. He's a somewhat famous former Republican, never Trumper, college professor. I think he's now at the Navy War College, maybe. And I bring him up not because he is the most important guy in the world. None of us are. But because the exchange is emblematic of a view, of one view within a progressive 60%. And that is what it's going to take to save democracy. To save democracy, we're going to have, I wouldn't call it a small d Democratic consensus, but we're going to need a small d Democratic supermajority. And I would say Tom Nichols lives within that supermajority. Twitter question to Tom Nichols, professor, author, says, don't we fear that concentration of wealth will erode democracy? Tom Nichols' answer, that's already happening, but I do not grieve that Bill Gates is fantastically more wealthy than I am. If you want to reform the political system, I'm with you. If you want to gripe about rich people, count me out. So political reform, yes. You want to talk automatic voter registration, you want to talk vote by mail plus voting centers, you want to talk about overturning Citizens United, you want to talk about public financing of elections. You can get it done in your town. That could happen in literally 100 cities around the United States without Congress having to do something about it. And it would transform the political economy fundamentally. Star voting or approval voting or ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting or reforming the Electoral College. So yeah, okay, the Tom Nichols School of Thought, we can talk all about that stuff. Political reform, yes. But gripe about rich people, count me out. And here's my response to Tom Nichols and how I want to cue up some of this conversation, my opening remark for this conversation on democracy. Is that reformed democracy will be necessary to reform the economy. My question, though, is, will a malformed economy make efforts to erode democracy more likely or even inevitable? It happened during the dawn of the industrial age. It's why the progressive movement was necessary. It's why the progressive media, I didn't say liberal media, it wasn't exactly, but why progressive media was necessary. It is happening with the dawn of the information age. This is what undergirds the favorite line ascribed to Justice Brandeis. We may have democracy, or we may have wealth concentrated in the hands of a few, but we may not have both. Because even if we do the Tom Nichols stuff, Rupert Murdoch can buy a TV network. Sinclair can buy 173 local TV stations. iHeartMedia, formerly Clear Channel, can turn off the progressive or liberal radio formats up and down the country, up and down the West Coast and across the country. Apple thinks it can charge 50% of publishing fees from content makers. This is what undergirds the Brandeis principle. So, Mr. Nichols, we don't need to gripe. We don't need to whine or complain. We need to act, to organize, to make change, to discuss, to write, to build institutions, not for purpose of harming an enemy, but because our liberation is bound together. Hat tip, Lila Watson. My name is Jefferson Smith. This is the Thom Hartmann Show. We'll be back with your calls.